Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Heretic Hammer Podcast. I'm your host, Marshall, and this is my co-host, Dylan.
Hello, hello.
And today, we're hitting it. We're getting to it. We skipped it from some illness. So now, we're doing it. It's the book club, Elemental Council.
We're no longer allergic to our books. We can actually read them.
We're literate. Let's go. Literacy pog.
Hooray.
Yeah, so today we are reading the Elemental Ghodh, the story of the Ghodh. I mean, no, wait. This
What were you trying to say?
making a dumb joke. Okay. So yeah, it's Elemental Council, which for us is the Elemental Council starring Ghodh, from our perspective.
It really is the Ghodh show featuring the Elemental Council.
You would think by our description that means he's in most of the book. You'd be wrong, but that doesn't mean he didn't steal the show. We'll talk about that in a minute.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
So the impetus for kind of us reading Elemental Council, obviously stemmed from two things. The obvious part being, you can look at Dylan's Fugi here and see why there would be an interest in a Tau book.
Or go back to any of the prior episodes where we talked about the Tau specifically, and
at all.
note that my interest is piqued.
Yes. And the other being that it was, I mean, as far as like kind of the community had decreed that we finally had a truly good Tau book. Something that Phil Kelly has prevented many a Tau fan from having for a long time.
Is Phil Kelly the like Kevin Feige of the Warhammer
Phil Kelly?
literary world?
Let me double check. Am I conflating names? Hold on, let me double check just to make sure I'm not like yeah, Phil Kelly. Okay, that's for some reason. Phil
if you
Kelly,
remove his face, is Kevin
thinking of
Feige
something
actually
else.
just underneath it?
Man, I didn't realize that Phil Kelly was still writing Farsight books all the way into 2025. That's crazy.
I
Not aware
didn't
of
either.
that.
What's a Farsight book?
A series of
Not a joke question, by the way. Serious question.
no the books about Commander Farsight that a large chunk of the people who are Tau and Commander Farsight fans despise.
Despise. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, no, people like I mean like when I say like a lot of like fans in general like do not like Phil Kelly's books, like they mean it. Like I've seen the like the writings of what is clearly like the residue of a like Farsight fan crash out on Adric when they did an episode about Farsight, and like how annoyed and angry the scriptwriter is at the fact at how Phil Kelly wrote them. So yeah, they're really like I've heard this sentiment otherwise. It's not like it's just because Adric's scriptwriter didn't like it, so I think nobody. I have heard it everywhere. It is just like there was a point where I literally like where I had I've lost it. It went into various bookmarks, I think, but I remember seeing like on like a Tau centered Reddit like subreddit where like somebody made like there was like a well upvoted list of like good Tau books for new fans, and like they were all labeled in the like technically you should read them, but they suck. It's like how they were labeled. They're like, it's unfortunately important because it's canon lore and and it's so thus it's important because Farsight's a huge player for the Tau, but they don't like it. The books don't feel good to read.
That's a shame.
It is truly, which is why Elemental Council, supposedly being good, was really this huge breath of fresh air and, like a big and like really exciting, because we're like, okay, it's not Farsight, especially a lot of fans' favorite, but we are getting really good Tau. We're finally going to experience the Tau, maybe as we should. So that was with our hope. So let's talk about kind of how we felt the book went. We're not going to do like a full plot rundown because God would be here for forever. This was a chunky book.
Very large book, especially compared to the previous ones that we've covered in our.
Yeah, I mean, like it was, I would say, I think it's like a couple hundred pages longer than The Lion. Here, let me actually, I could quickly double check the length here between The Lion versus Elemental Council. So we've got I gotta mark this. So let's see. Lion Son of the Forest as an audiobook was 12 hours and 15 minutes. And Elemental Council was 17 hours and 32 minutes.
Yeah, that's a bit of a difference between those for sure.
Yeah.
And is that the way that you primarily consumed this, was through audiobook?
I actually did both. I tried to read it, then
okay.
I realized that I needed, because we had an original recording date, so I was like, I need to get moving, and clearly I'm not going to be able to sit down and read as much as I need to. So I was like, I just need to be able to listen while working. So I just I grabbed my last credit from Audible and used it on this so that I could really push through it and then read when I get home, or stuff like that.
I started reading this over my Christmas vacation when I went over to visit my folks there. Took the Kindle with me, and I was figuring, like, if I can really take advantage of the number of days that I've got here, I'll just be able to rip through it. And I think I got maybe halfway done before coming back. Definitely realized, like, oh yeah, this is a lot beefier than I had expected it to be. And so I kind of had to finish up the last, like, couple hundred pages there, in between work where I could.
Yeah. And so, we made it. We definitely, we made it through for the first recording, ended up with 2 extra weeks of time. So now we're going to try to push through that by going through what was once really fresh to being not a little bit less. But I think I still have enough to, obviously, especially with some of the notes I made, to still make some like interesting, a lot of, I think what I really have is just like, honestly, it's just like, to me, it's like really interesting thoughts to how the book like lets you see the Tau. But first, I think we should just go over what is kind of just like our overall feeling on the book, right? Like super,
just general overall feeling. Yes.
Yeah, like TLDR review.
Yes.
Do you want to start?
Yeah. My TLDR on this book is that I think it is great, very enjoyable, very long. Felt that it kind of was falling apart a bit near the end, just in terms of its pacing. But I did like most of the characters. Overall, really enjoyed it, even if it did require me to really like stop and ponder things a lot more. And it definitely didn't deter me from liking the Tao. If anything, it genuinely has made me more interested in the Tao.
I really feel like the whole like the pacing falls off at the end is like such a 40K book problem. Like every book seems to have this issue
where they have such a like strong foundation, like a strong start of like where they want the story to be, and then they get to like that last act and kind of struggle to keep it coherent all the way through.
Yeah,
it's something that I admittedly I hadn't felt it as strongly with our previous books that we had read.
Sure.
But I really was feeling it with this one. Like it was kind of, again, as much as I just said that, like I really enjoyed the book, like that, like I say, that last kind of part of it, there are elements we'll get into where it felt more like a chore trying to get to the end there.
Yeah. No, I think 100% too. There are honestly parts where like I actually ended up skipping through because I just realized like we're just in like random battlefield description.
That's
now.
Cheating. I'll have you know, you're not allowed to just skip.
Yeah, well, you know
through.
what I would have done? I would have just turned the page.
We will be sending you to the re-education camps.
Oh, that's something that definitely want to talk about.
We're gonna dig into that.
Yeah. So, but no, I genuinely like I said, like I also very much enjoyed the book. Again, similarly, feel like at the end the pacing started to get weird, but again, it's like this thing where I think it depends maybe if you like how into like the bolter porn you are, right? Because like if you really like the battle books, you know, if you're a big Space Marine book reader, especially like mid 2000s or like 2010s Space Marine book reader, you know, and like that's your niche, then like you're more willing to sit through it. But like a lot of that always ends up feeling like battle descriptions always feel like they end up being like various word soups. But like the other thing that kind of started to get me like thrown off a bit was how like they were clearly trying to create this like who and when is the is the real bad guy. I guess I'm keeping this. I'm saying I don't know why or if I'm saying this spoiler free at the moment. If you couldn't tell with a book club episode, we're gonna have spoilers. I want to warn this now.
Sometimes we're a little loosey goosey with it, but generally speaking, whenever we've done a couple of these previously with other books, and whenever we do a book club episode like this, we're pretty open about. We're gonna talk about the full book. So
yeah,
if this is something where you want to read the book on your own time, you want to, maybe try it out for yourself first, then just take our, kind of general thoughts there of like, it is really good. I think it is a good book with some flaws, but otherwise it is a really good book. And if you're somebody who is like interested in the idea of Tao, you absolutely should read this.
Yeah, it's just like the way I feel like they handled the whodunit kind of became this like they were trying it was one of those things like they were trying clearly to make it curious, like who is it, but in a way they ended up making it feel more confusing, and by the end of the book they did at least kind of clarify like some of the when question around it. But it was always just like I just always felt like it was like that's the thing. Like it shouldn't take it to the very end of the book for me to be like, where the hell are we? Like what? How much time has passed? Like,
yeah, for sure.
But like, I really did like the fact that, like, because like Space Marines are always funky because in a lot of non-Imperial books, even sometimes in Imperial books, right, they can always kind of come off and be portrayed as just like, I'm gonna shoot first and ask questions later. And granted, as a part of the Raptors, that's not really a thing they do. They're very like standard militaristic because they're based on the Raven Guard, right? They're essentially if the Raven Guard was a little bit less stealthy. So, and I only say a little bit, but that's what they are, right? So they still employ a lot of these kind of stealth tactics, but it's essentially like realistically what it is it's tactics that like our current militaries use, creating, figuring out, patrol patterns, figuring out caravan systems, studying your enemy, and then attacking based on those trends, right? And doing so in a way that does not immediately put you just in a gigantic, line of fire.
Yeah, totally.
And, so like I was glad that they like gave him that, but he always still just felt so like one note, but like it's tough because that's just how Space Marines are. Like they're kind of always just going to be very one note because they're like heavily indoctrinated, like nated, and thus like brainwashed to this point where they're never going to have the same doubt, question, or manipulatability that, other characters would with Xenos. Chaos, it changes, right? Chaos gets in the mix with the Space Marine. Different story.
Marshall, I can't tell you how glad I was that this story didn't involve chaos really in any way.
Oh yeah. Well, it's hard to do that.
I don't hate chaos, but I'm good. I'm good for a minute to not be thinking about it. You know what I mean?
Right. And luckily with Tau, it's very hard to have chaos be an enemy because they just don't see him as a threat. Like the chaos is just like, what are you? I don't read your soul. Like, so it's just like, they're like, who? And so
yeah,
it's always they're always kind of in a weird, their fights are weird. So it's hard to make chaos an antagonist. But what I mean is like when it's, Space Marine versus Xenos, it's often hard to get a Space Marine to come around to have any semblance of, cooperation. It has happened even with the Tau. It has happened. Parts of Damocles went into, I believe it was Damocles, went into truce because of a Tyranid invasion, right? So like they're there, like it's possible. It's just very difficult without some type of horrific imminent threat staring you in the face to get them to work with a Xeno, right?
Sure.
So I think one way or the other, we're going to end up with this kind of semi one note villain. It was just kind of like this realm of like with the second villain where it just kind of, I was just like, I thought there'd be more setup to this. But they just kind of appeared.
The idea behind like the assassin.
Yeah. I'm just like, what? So that's where, and that's kind of the same point though, right? That's part of that end of the book where like it starts to feel disjointed because you're like, and like the pacing starts to feel off because you're like, yes, you do question when did they come into play from the start, but at the same time, you're like, well, from a literary sense standpoint, they should only be so long because, if there's too many things that like an assassin shouldn't know, and there's too many things about the ethereals that assassins can't mimic, no matter how good their, their like shifting material is, So
when we did,
that's why I was always like, where did this come from?
When we did our episode on the Tau lore, I can't remember if we talked about this because this is something that I kind of, after I read the book, I like dug into it a bit online to
Mm-hmm.
see if there's any mention of it. But there's like a couple points where they make note of. There's an interesting thing about the Tao, where a lot of the conventional like emotional means of communication that we humans use don't really exist for them. And like
Yeah.
they have like specific gestures that they use in conversation to kind of help like further like sort of represent or like convey the feelings that they have. And uh it was interesting how I think it was. I'm trying to remember who. Let me check in my notes. Somebody was having a conversation with Yori. I think it was Swordlight, where Swordlight, their impression of Yori at one point is that it's like talking to a corpse. And part of the reason for that is like at that point, Yori has been killed and replaced by the assassin, but the assassin doesn't understand that kind of difference in communication that exists for the Tao. So like when they're talking with them, they're not using like hand gestures or like signals or anything like that. And so it leads to Swordlight being like, man, it's like they're just a corpse. Like they're not doing anything.
Yeah.
And that was like a really interesting, neat little thing in the book that made me like kind of look into it further afterwards. I was like, what's going on with that? That's a really unique thing because there's so much going on with the ethereals and like the idea of like their, you know, kinetic mental connection that they have and how much of that is like actual influence they have and actual control. But the other ways that they handle the like Tao language and culture and how they deal with things compared to humans, I thought was actually like really interesting.
Yeah, I mean that was inherently the best aspect or like takeaway from the whole book was how we actually got to learn more about that, and I think we could explore that a bit more in a minute. But
Mm-hmm.
the like still I think with all this stuff combined, the book was still just like so like it was still like so good overall, just even from like a how the characters like evolved through the whole story. Because I think there was a lot of points where like so Kay is a great example of this. um she, I think a lot of times people look or think, or like young writers especially, look at how they construct character development, and they think of it as like a linear scale, right? Where like you're always just through the story, you're growing. Be it small or rapid, it's a straight line,
Mm.
or at least it's a firm ray. That's how I think a lot of young people and very like and a lot of like lay like story like story people, or a lot of lay people interpret stories, right? They think like my character should go from here to there, and it should just like there should always be growth. Why are they suddenly dipping back into old habits? And I think the thing that becomes important when you're when you are truly analyzing like character growth is understanding real human growth, right? We ourselves fall back on bad habits and past behaviors all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And Kay is a great example of this because right from the prologue section into the elemental council forming, she has this kind of growth, and she's like immediately harder, more confident and set. But then various points, reaches a wall and falls back a bit, right? And then she moves
Mm-hmm.
forward, and then she falls back, and then she moves forward. It's it's a dip. There's dips within the growth. You still end up from A to B, but there's like little dips that go down on the way in,
Yeah.
and that's realistic. That's how we grow as people, because it's when we face something that it's when we have a new challenge in our lives to face that we often end up, that's where we end up falling back to old habits, to bad habits, right? You know, and so that's kind of and that's always important, because I think like sometimes I always felt like some growths were moving and like some weren't. So like I mentioned, Kay's was really good, but Orr's always felt strange to me, because it was always kind of like he kind of just doesn't really change much. And then
Or is very set in how he views things as a watercast spy.
And then
he
finally
has a very
like,
very antagonistic nature. He has especially with Swordlight, actually.
Yeah.
Or in Swordlight, like them really not getting along, him constantly calling her sixes to the point of just being like, stop it. It's not, it's not
literally
a good
choking him out.
Choking him out, yeah, putting him in a chokehold. Like, no, Or is definitely that member of the group who has like this very set idea of like how things are, isn't, is clearly in most literary tropes the character that wouldn't necessarily go through change, or if they would, it would be like at the very end they would they would be the one to learn something from the young blood or something.
Yeah, I was gonna say honestly what it kind of seems like was this would almost be like the combo, or in sixes in Swordlight was like the combo would be like a combo meme, or it'd be like the check out this guy having fun meme, where he's like pointing to the side, be like, check out sixes over here, and then sixes would be coming at him with the chokehold saying, I fucking hate you and hope you die.
Yeah, no, it's got kind of like a buddy cop Lethal Weapon type feel to it, where there's the antagonistic nature between the two of them as they're at the same time working together to start to solve the problem.
Right, exactly. And but like Aura's growth mainly happens really like at the end. So it's just kind of interesting to be like, obviously there was a focus on Kay a bit, because she's kind of clearly meant to be like one of the main like focal characters, because realistically, when you have a book of 6 characters, you gotta select a few.
So I promise I'm going to keep this brief, because it's one of those things I could spend hours on. If you ever talk to me about film, about movies, the thing I'll tell you is that a lot of my favorite films are films about ensembles, as opposed to just being about like a singular character. I really adore stories that are about a group of people who are interesting in their ways, but then have to come together, and like the relationships that form between them and the way they have to sort of work with each other. I adore that. And I think this book is, if it's not my favorite example, but it's still a pretty good example of how those relationship dynamics can be written.
Mhm.
And something that tends to happen even with ensemble type narratives is that you still kind of find yourself drawn to the idea of like, okay, there's a group of characters here, but who's the main character? Who's the like,
yeah,
who's really getting a lot of the like narrative juice out of this, and or is like meant to be the closest foil to the reader, like who acts as kind of like the reader's perspective as well. And I definitely was getting that from Kay, and I'd argue a little bit from Swordlight as well, but it definitely feels like Kay is like the author's like narrative pull of like this is
Mm-hmm.
the character that the reader going to be is going to have the strongest connection to, who they're mostly going to be sort of in touch with no matter what. Like there was never a moment where I even entertained the idea of like, could Kay be the spy? Could Kay be the traitor? Like there's a certain way that you write characters where it just becomes inherent that it's like, no, this is the character that we are meant to be cheering on for most of the story, if not entirely from beginning to end.
Yeah, and I think now maybe is a good time to maybe start kind of a general thought on like maybe like the characters themselves, because of being an
Sure.
ensemble, I think it kind of does require a bit of that uh kind of thought of like, all right, let's, how do kind of each of the characters kind of stack up, and then how does that interaction with each other go well,
Mm-hmm.
um so funny enough, I was like trying to piece together in that prologue like who's gonna be the elemental council, right? Like as we were introducing all these characters, and
Mm-hmm.
I really thought it was gonna be Rello
Yeah,
for a
Rollo's an
while.
interesting character for sure that they start off with, and then you're kind of like, I, because he, it's funny, he kind of serves a similar role to like what Slipknot does in the Suicide Squad film, and I know that's like a deeply offensive thing for me to say based on that film.
Oh, which
Uh,
one?
the
The James
original
Gunn
David
or
Ayer, the
oh
the David Ayer Suicide Squad.
oh yeah, okay.
Because it's essentially it's like here's the character that is quote unquote part of the group, or like seems like they're going to be a big part of the group, and then they get killed off very early on in the story. Um, Rello, the nice thing about Rello is that they are a good character and they're interesting, and you are
Yeah.
sad when they die. Um, and yeah, that prologue all around was just like, oh, this is a really interesting way to go about this, because in stories like this where you have a like sort of a kamikaze squad, if you will, but it's like a this group that is made up of criminals or ne'er-do-wells or outcasts from the system, where the idea is like they are being sent in because if they die, it's not a big deal, or like if
Yes.
they succeed, it's going to help them clear out their debt or clear their name in some way to allow them to like fully just reintegrate back into society, as it were. Um, and what tends to happen with these type of stories is that in order to like ensure that the stakes are there, they will pick a character early on and be like, all right, and that character's dead, so now nobody's safe. Um, that didn't happen with me. Like Rello
No, yeah.
dies, and I'm like, that's a shame, because I liked Rello. I thought they were cool, but it didn't install the fear in me of like, well, now anybody's game, like anybody can die. Like, so I
Yeah,
feel like
no.
they so immediately establish K in such a way that I'm like, nah, nobody's touching K. Nobody, like nothing's happening with
Yeah.
them. Swordlight, there's so much going on with Swordlight. Like that's not going to be an issue. They're gonna hang out for at least most of this. Like it doesn't work as well to sort of pull that trope of like, killing somebody off early on to like establish the anybody can fall at any time type of deal.
Yes. So we end up with what we do end up with is um we have K. So because obviously the whole thing of the elemental
Earthcast
council
engineer.
is, yeah, they're all a member of each cast. So yeah, so we have
Yes.
K, Earthcast, Swordlight, Firecast, or the Watercast. How did you pronounce
Yeah.
this game again?
Which
Our pilot.
say
Is it just
I'm,
say?
I'm
Okay.
I think it's say. I didn't do an audiobook, so I can
Yeah, I think it was
say,
say.
but
I think
I
it was
was
say.
pronouncing it say in my brain.
Yeah. And then so he's the aircast, and then we had the Paramount Mover,
The Paramount Mover, yes, Yori.
Yori, as the my mind ethereal cast.
Yep, the ethereal kind of the
my brain went away for a moment.
the gruff leader of the group.
Well, I wouldn't say gruff per se, I guess, because he's inherently supposed to be very level-headed. He is kind of.
I think that's more what
the neutral. Yeah.
Yeah.
He is the neutral. He's the I feel no way about this one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
I never trusted those neutrals. Anyway, well, what's funny with Orr actually in the intro? They start by describing this guy Jakara.
Yeah.
And like, it's really funny to me how they like specifically specify how Jakara is like specifically really handsome and good, like good looking, and like
the thing about Jakara was that he was a total beefcake and a hottie.
Yeah, right. It was just so funny because then, but it was like, I guess to like denote how experienced and grizzled Orr is, because Jakara is he's kind of like the poster child for the water cast, which is the diplomat that goes to the planets, heralds the word of the greater good, and is welcomed in open arms and goes to the conference room with the planetary governor, and they have a lovely chit chat, and then they decide to enter the fold, but in a way to not let the Imperium notice right away, so that they can bolster their defenses for when they inevitably do. Blah blah blah. Right? He's supposed to be like, that's what Jakara is supposed to be. Or is like and this is actually what I really do love about Orr being the character that we got, was that they were like, and Orr is the other part, the part you don't hear about, the part you don't see, the one that has to go in, sometimes go work with the scum and essentially create, like revolutionary movements, because they're clearly not getting anywhere from the higher ups. So he's going to go in and essentially plant this seed of what could be done with the greater good and flip the planet around underground. And we never hear about that often, like almost ever, from the Tower perspective. But now we do. And like Orr's perspective on everything was so interesting to me, because he's always trying to kind of rediscover, after doing essentially having to betrayed a great many people, kind of knowing and acknowledging like life under the Tau Empire for those that are not Tau is not perfect.
Yes.
Like
absolutely.
It is. You are still essentially subservient to someone. Granted, in most cases, you would probably, as an Imperial citizen, look at the Tau, look at how you're treated currently under the Imperial system, and still take the Tau, right? Like there was a meme I saw a bit ago where it was like, all right, Imperial guardsmen scum, we're taking you hostage. You're going to be fed a pittance every day, like every meal you'll be fed a pittance, and you'll have to drink like tap water or something. And they're like, oh my God, we get 3 meals a day and water. Oh, crazy.
I have
bro.
a place to sleep and I have a room to myself, and I get food.
They're like, holy shit, this is prison. So it's like, it's twofold, right? Because the Tau look at what the humans have under the Tau Empire and look at it as like, or at least especially Orr, look at it as kind of like those poor dumb Guevesa who he's kind of like, they were kind of betrayed by their ideals, and thus, like, we'll never trust. Well, like, our trust will be misplaced forever, blah, blah, blah. But like, there's probably a good chunk of the human populace who's like, my life has never been better. Even though they are technically still working in a factory, but like now they get like benefits. They went from working 14 hours a day, no benefits, and essentially just being indentured servitude, to like working 8 hours a day with benefits and having pay to go home to their family, but they still have to work at this stupid factory job.
Yep.
Like, it's like, comparatively, it's just like, oh no, what'll I do? It's like, sure, it's not perfect, but I mean, it's a hell of a lot better than it probably used to be. So that's it. So like, I kind of found that thought and that idea funny when like reading Orr's kind of like struggles through like his personal placement, which is why like it was so interesting that like, in that prologue, he's comparing himself to Jakara so much. And we already kind of started talking about each of the other characters as well, but Kay was like I think honestly the way they wrote Kay, like I think she ended up making herself a great kind of main character.
Yeah, she is very endearing, for sure.
Yeah, well, and I think like I'm really glad that they made their main character not the Firecast warrior, right? Granted, the Firecast warrior Swordlight has a lot. She's got a lot of screen time, per se, right?
Mm-hmm.
But she's not like it being like so much attention being put on Kay. I think just really helps with, again, showing more than just the fire warriors, which is most of what we've had like for years, from like a story perspective.
Yeah.
So like just being able to see like, I mean, honestly, for example, like kind of figuring out that like, oh, like, cause I had the thought like, well, where do the combat medics or like, who's the medics? Like, what cast is that? Would that be Watercast?
Okay,
Is that?
I'm so glad. Oh, I'm
and
so glad
like,
you're bringing this
and
up.
like
This
seeing Kay kind of do that and like mention it, I was like, oh, I guess that's the Earth cast. It's
yeah. This whole, I'm so glad to bring this up. This is in my notes. The whole caste system, we could go forever talking about the cast because it's such an important part of Tau society, but it is also a huge part of this book and these relationships between these characters is being influenced by their ideas of like, if you're part of this caste, you are allowed to do this. You are responsible for this. You can touch this. You can operate this, but otherwise, stay within your lines of like what you're allowed to do. And it made me think about the members of Tau society that aren't actively in the military and like in the war effort and like what castes they technically fall under. And I was trying to remember, like, if you're somebody who isn't in the military, you're a member of Tau society, but you are like working class, do you automatically just fall under the Earth caste? Or is it a case of like, you can be in the Earth caste, but still be holding like a surface level job? And like whether or not one informs the other, if it's the other way around, like I ended up really thinking about that heavily over the course of this book.
Yeah, well, it actually appears like, honestly, based on some of the descriptions, I kind of feel like I wonder if the most populous cast is the Earth cast, because like the job that supposedly Kay and like her other the like essentially the cohort, the other like Earth cast cohort that she was assigned with for that first mission, like they were essentially going to be doing the fish guts scene from The Simpsons when they got sent to work in Japan, like
it was like the fishing thing.
Yeah. And it's like, I was like, I guess that's an Earthcast job. Mm-hmm. So like if that type of menial labor or like any type of factory-esque working is all Earthcast, so like I was like, I wonder if Earthcast is like the most populous cast. Cause like I'm sure there's similar things with like the Earth or with the water cast and like, like like your retail workers, maybe a water cast, like it's just like interesting to think about just like where in true like Tao society do a lot of these casts fit, because like the thing that, and really what it does is it draws more attention to my eyes about how the classic lore that the Guavesa, the humans going into,
Yes.
the Tau, are only in the fire cast feels wrong. Because the fire cast, as far as we truly only have ever known, and this book doesn't change this outlook, is that the fire cast is the only one that is explicitly military. But like, what is old man Jenkins gonna do for the military?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
guy who once worked, like if they're factory workers, then are they not technically part of the Earth cast? Like, that's the part that I was like, I'm starting to think that might not be a good true statement anymore. Because like I'm sure that they do like the whole like whoever is an able-bodied, so like whoever is an able-bodied person of such age group, you will be sent into the military. Like you'll just be conscripted. Like sure, I'm willing, like I could believe that. But like there's gonna be people who are not able-bodied, who are not, like who are not necessary or who like aren't military ready, that the tower are going to like they're not a society to be like, all right, then you're useless. Go to the go to the liquefaction, vat, like you're like, they're not just gonna, that's not what they do.
No, that's not what they do.
So it's like, they still all get the re-education and all that, but like where they must go other places. And that was where like my mind really started to go there. But I think we only got that because essentially just we finally got to really see kind of how even within combat, just like where did all these like how do these other casts play a role? Because like Eric cast, it was kind of easy. You're like, he's a pilot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Firecast is responsible for the mechs and like the other machines on the ground, but Aircast specifically gets spaceships.
Yes, but like they do have to, because I remember what was it? It was like they described how like an Earth cast will start working on,
they have like a supervisor role. It's
yeah, where
really
it's like
weird. Yeah.
Yeah, like they'll start working on something, and then if it reaches a point, essentially the Aircast person will be like, "All right, now that's my job," and they'll switch. Like
yeah, it's very much like it's got this like union sub rules feel to it of like certain union members. When you're on like a film set, very very particular about like this person can handle this equipment at this time, and is able to. They are responsible for overseeing certain aspects of the film production, and there's like a lot of like frequent like transference of things between the different departments and the different positions. Yeah, all of that was just like fascinating to me, but it felt like the kind of thing that could also lead to difficulties if the the quote unquote mission or the plan went sideways. It's really difficult to kind of improvise out a win scenario from that if you're so locked into this idea that like certain people are only allowed to do certain things.
Right. I mean, it is kind of like, for example, they talk about essentially how, a water cast or earth cast, essentially like they, for the most part, have to kind of be like if there's no fire cast around them or all their fire casts die and they're face to face with the enemy, they essentially have to surrender.
Why?
Because they cannot pick up a gun.
Yeah.
It
That
is.
that was so crazy. It was like, no, you essentially, if you find yourself on the battlefield, you are to effectively just surrender and die.
Yeah. And, I kind of wonder, that does make you say me question, like, why would you do that? It just never feels like a point where it makes sense. I get the idea of not arming all of them, right? From a militaristic standpoint. I
Yeah,
get
the same
maybe,
way you wouldn't like arm a civilian that
yeah,
wasn't,
or just like,
already trained in military. Yeah.
right. Like, you don't give the forklift operator an M16, like it's just like, I get that, but it was more in the realm of like, why instill it so deep that if it's like, hey, the soldier next to you died, uh, and there is, and like for example, like it would be like, you're or you're, especially let's say earth cast, Tau, working with an enclave, right? And let's say even in the greatest of circumstances, right? You know, Anva like has his bodyguards die and you're left, but in the fight, it's between you and the guy in front of you. You're just gonna let the guy kill the ethereal?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's the weird thing to me. Like, it should, like, your grand leaders next to you, and but you like that the grand leader has designated that it would be worse if you picked up the gun and defended him versus him dying. It's just a
Yeah.
wild thought, Like, you just would think like essentially a class that effectively is a ruling class would one way or the other still think that, all right, I'm going to need someone we're going to need at least a little bit of self-preservation from our people. But I guess not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, it's so wild to me.
Yeah. Um but uh let's talk a little bit about Swordlight, because kind of especially one of the other kind of main character that isn't like, an ethereal. Um so Swordlight was very interesting from the jump, because like the fact that like very early when we meet her, that it talks about how, like immediately goes into how her suit, like pumps in painkillers and steroids as like she's, facing combat, getting injured by various things. And it was just kind of an interesting thought, like where it's just like, yeah, I guess it would make sense for this like hyper advanced, military, you know, race of the Tau, that they'd be like, all right, like we're just gonna literally put, pain and like and injectors like into these even just into these like normal fire warrior suits, because that way they can keep going. Like, because like Space Marines kind of get that too, right? But
Yeah.
it's also like somewhat in their like DNA, like it's a whole thing, and so it's just like, it's interesting that it's like one of those things where it's like, once they determine at least a warrior is of importance enough that they just are like, yeah, like we're gonna put shit so that they can keep going.
Swordlight, who I cherish dearly and was easily one of my favorite characters, like from the jump. Like genuinely within like 5 minutes of being introduced to Swordlight, I was like, this is one of my favorites. I love them.
Well, like how they're like, no, don't go. We need you on television. And she's like,
this is
fuck
what,
you.
this is what I
I'm
want to talk about.
going.
I specifically wanted to talk about this. So she is obviously just like very dogmatic, very much like, I am here to fight. I want to get in there. I'm not the like brilliant tactician. I'm not the water cast negotiator. I am Firecast. I'm here to fight. And I was like, hell yeah, you go, girl. But the whole thing about like her being set up in such a way that like she can obviously be a very effective fighter, but is more so being used as a form of like propaganda and rallying for the other Tau forces. It's very Captain America, where it's like,
Yeah.
we have this super soldier who can obviously do great work in the fight, but we're gonna have him peddle war bonds
Yeah,
as
because he's
effectively a
too expensive
mascot
to
for
lose.
the U.S. military. And I was seeing a lot of that in this as well, where it's like we have somebody who's very powerful, but they're in that interesting dichotomy where they're so powerful as to be invaluable. And being so valuable to the war effort means that, yeah, it's a risk for them to put her out into the fray. They'd much rather keep her as this sort of propaganda thing, as something to make television appearances and to like encourage the ongoing war effort instead of actually going out fighting and potentially dying and them having to get yet another clone of the original Starlight going to make that happen. And that whole thing immediately, I was just like, I'm so bought in on the frustration she feels to be so intrinsically as a member of the Firecast, wanting to fight, knowing your purpose, having this strong will of like, I know what I want to do, what I'm here to set out to do. And the idea of being held back, not because of you specifically, but because of what you have been created to replicate, which is the original Sword Light, and what your governing body is like asking of you to represent, that doesn't actually represent you yourself as a person.
Yeah, well, and the thing that really really intrigued me, obviously much later, was the fact that it also became very clear by the end of the book when she, because I hadn't realized that she hadn't done this up to this point, that when she finally removes her helmet in front of others, because she's inherently like, she's ostensibly on the book cover, right? So like, it never dawned on me, because they never explicitly describe it every time. It's always kind of subtly referenced that she keeps her helmet on all the time when she's around the others. And, when she finally does, they describe essentially how she is decaying, essentially. Like,
yeah.
Clearly, like, the cloning process, I mean, first, Tau don't live very long, but clearly the cloning process is like, they're putting them through some form of kind of rapid aging. And I always kind of, what makes me wonder about it is, if they are cloning, they're essentially attempting to clone and re-educate these Tau. What I wonder is, are we looking at a way, because like, are we essentially looking at a way to elongate the life of Tau, or will eventually every clone come out too old, right? Are they only copying the ages of these sword lights, and they're at the age that they last were, like, that's what I wonder.
Yeah.
Because like, the way that they keep Shadow Sun around is, she goes into cryostasis and then is brought out when she's needed, like, dreadnoughts in the Imperium. So I always kind of wonder about what is it that's drawing them to have this kind of rapid aging. And like, I found that part very interesting, because it just like, this cloning discussion, I think, is going to become important. I feel like at some point in the Tau lore, it's just going to be a matter of how.
Yeah.
Though, well, let's talk about Yori first. Yori, I thought, was an interesting character. Because I like that he was just that he wasn't super prominent, right? Like, and I mean that in the sense of like, he wasn't overbearing. And like, that was his objective. He wanted them to work together to find the solution, right, to whatever problem they were facing.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't want to just be there being like, all right, I need you to do this, you do that, you do this, you do that, you do this, I do that. Okay, cool. See you later. Like he
Wait,
didn't
because that's
want to
not
do
when
that.
like in the rare instances where an ethereal like ends up on a battlefield, they are not the sergeant. They are not a commander. That's not necessarily what they're there to do. They're more so almost there to inspire than they are to like make a lot of direct commands and like, completely take over in that way.
Yeah, exactly. And really what he was just a mediator, come in
Yeah.
and just be like, all right, we're getting a little heated here. Let's come down. And like, this is where our wisdom like says we should go, right? Like conventional wisdom tells us, he's a mentor, that's what he is there to be. He's there just to let them, but like a good one where he's letting them kind of discover what do they need to do to create, like to find solutions. And I really like that. And I think that's where and like there were only these few times that like he seemed to crack a little, right? Like when Jules dies, it's kind of like that's kind of his first sign where he's clearly bitter, at the fact that he died. And I always kind of wondered why. At first I thought maybe, like later I thought, like I looked back and I was like, was that maybe around when, the assassin took over? But I was like, no, because they noticed that right away, pretty much when a different Paramount mover was talking to them. So no, it was definitely that far later period. Yeah, it was like, it was in that like, just after they captured, the Space Marine and everything. So I was like, oh, okay, sure. Okay, so I was like, what made him so bitter about it? And I guess really it must have really only just been the fact that he kind of read his mind, kind of saw that like he still was kind of a mind of two loyalties in a way.
Sure.
Like his loyalty
divided
was
between.
Because like he was in love with the ethereal that they were rescuing, but he also still had his own kind of indoctrinated love for the Imperium, because he was supposed to be a spy originally, and he kind of fell in too hard.
Yeah, wasn't fully integrated over to the idea of like the Tauva of the greater good. Still had some of their imperial beliefs intact.
Yeah. And so like I think maybe he just saw that. But that's what I kind of found interesting, where it's like it's still this indications like, hey, like the ethereals are not perfect. Like he had the gut reaction to be like, no, leave him here. Fuck this guy. Because he kind of saw, I think he saw that. I think he saw that kind of lasting imprint from his soul, read that as a psyker, and was kind of like, and I think he was insulted. I think he felt a little insulted, a little betrayed, and he kind of was maybe a little bitter. And I mean, look, you only to see the bitterness and pettiness that the ethereals can have, you need only look at Farsight's story, which we'll get to at some point in the future. But like that's, I liked seeing it here, because this isn't just like, oh, we have a Tau that doesn't want to do whatever we say. This is kind of like him just kind of alone, personally feeling insulted and kind of having a fairly human reaction to it. And that was interesting. I actually, as that developed, I actually kind of liked that we got to see that, because he comes around, later, sees the value that was all provided and the sacrifice, all that. but it was still interesting to me to see that kind of shift, you know?
His whole thing with Commander Noble Dawn,
Mm-hmm.
that like animosity between them was very interesting. Um I feel like it didn't go anywhere super crazy by the end of it, but I think that was just kind of the nature of like by the time you get to that point in the book, there's so many other elements being introduced and other things that need to be focused on that it's just kind of like we got to put that aside for now, focus on everything else. And then not too long after that is when we're to understand that like Yori has been killed and replaced by the assassin. My I
Yeah.
think I think my least favorite part of the book is the period of time where it's like they come to this grand revelation of like it's Yori. Yori appears to be the traitor. And there's a lot of like games of telephone that are having to happen where
Yeah.
a lot of the same conversation keeps happening over and over of like, we think there's a traitor. We think that it's Yori. How could it be an ethereal? You know, it's built into them. They could never possibly betray the idea of the Tao. It simply can't be done. We have to tell so-and-so. Go to tell them. And we believe that this person's a traitor. What? How can that be? That's not possible. Like, it felt like we were going through that cycle like multiple times. And I'm thinking in my head, like, well, okay, like can we maybe get everybody in the same room at the same time and kind of speed up this process?
Right.
Because
Like you have the technology.
guys, do we really got to keep having the same thing happen over and over? And then you get to like the follow up of it of like, okay, no, actually Yori has been replaced by the assassin. And then it's like, for me, I was just kind of like, oh, I don't know that I love that. Like, it's decent as like a plot twist, as like this thing of like,
Yeah.
especially in like an espionage style story where, you know, the idea is like you can't really trust anyone. You have to kind of be suspicious of everybody. It kind of makes sense in a whodunit, but it's also, it felt weirdly anticlimactic to me once the book had gotten to that point and had finally been like, okay, so here's what actually happened. And I'm like, we spent so much time spinning the wheels on this that I kind of got a little like it didn't matter to me as much by that point. I found Artemax's plan, his whole idea of like, you know, working with the assassin to kind of take down the Tau from the inside, and the idea of like wanting to turn the humans against them, encouraging the uprising, but then also wanting to use the assassin as a means to like further infiltrate into Tau society and like create discord there. By that point, I was like, this is way more interesting than what has actually happened with Yori and like the idea of there being an assassin itself. By the time they're getting that revelation out and like properly explaining it, I'm like, this feels like a small cog in the bigger picture at this point. It no longer feels that important to me. And it feels like it takes up way too much of the runtime of the book for them to like get past this idea that like an ethereal could turn against the Tau. And it's like, yeah, well, of course it can. It wasn't actually the ethereal. I don't know. This was the thing that like really was like the biggest wedge in my overall enjoyment of the book, was this whole part where they're spending so much time on this thing of like, we think there's a traitor, it might be Yori, but we don't know for sure. We think, and it just takes way too long to get to the conclusion. I don't know if you felt the same way or how you felt about the reveal, if you felt differently, but it really dragged for me.
I think the only thing that was weird to me about it, and maybe what I was kind of expecting, was I forgot her name, but the ethereal that they were rescuing.
Keith.
Yes. Um, yeah, Kirkath, I always
Yeah,
felt,
sorry, Kirketh. Yep.
um, yeah, I just realized when you said it, the way I heard it, I remember hearing it. Um, the, I straight up thought that she was just always the assassin. I thought she was a plant.
Sure.
So when it ended up being just like the assassin shows up later, I was like, you like when this whole assassin thing or like question, just like I always thought something was sus about Kirkath, right? Just the way that she would act, the way that she was with like the Tau that were super, like that were just like the hyper, like for them xenophobic Tau.
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of like, something's telling me that she's kind of poisoning the water. And I'm like, something's wrong here, right?
Yeah.
So when the idea of it being the assassin kind of came around, I was like, okay, I think it's Kirkath because she's always seems off. No one ever feels like, everyone always feels like they're off put around her, and it's just like, or that like she's always saying something that confuses them. So it's like, okay, well, it's like, it's got to be her, right? And the, like the fact that it was just like, no, they just showed up at some random point, dumped the Paramount mover into some like apparent, like some apparent ship, like chucked him into the sea. And then, then he was in there at some point. It, like, I was always then just like, well, then why was she like this? And I never felt like her writing was like superb by any means. So then when they're trying to figure out all this, and like to me, that also 100%, there is a point where Kirkath and the fake Paramount mover are next to each other. Kirkath should have immediately known. They are psychic. Like,
Yeah,
I
you're thinking that
that
she would be able to sense in some way that something was off.
yes, because I know for a fact that Calidus assassins do a lot of training to essentially teach themselves, right, to fully go into the mind of the person that they are controlling or that they are disguised as, right? Like they will effectively like they have things where like they can take the memories. They're like
brainwashing
fully,
themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And it is so that they can, that it's so that they obviously like can be detected less likely by various psychers, but it's not foolproof. And the Tau have a very different mind, and one way or another, there's gonna be some type of remnant in there. So like the idea that like an ethereal was just immediately not like just like I squint, you're not Yori. It is kind of weird to me. And so then the fact that, granted, they essentially had a one scene together as fake before they apparently fought, which also I want to note, listening to that fight, I straight up thought, again, because like you hear the voice of like, or what is like supposedly supposed to be this voice of the assassin, but they make it sound like it, but it's like also coming like, it was weird. Like, cause like the way that the assassin was describing fighting Kirkath was as if they were fighting. It was like, it was weird. Like it felt like maybe, I don't know if it was like going back and forth between their minds at some point, because they were like getting into how like, I guess because they were just saying like alien or whatever, that like that is how the Tau view humans. It's kind of a similar mirror in a way.
Yeah, it's definitely a flip where you got to remember that like an alien to them is a
Yes, but
Xenos.
they
You know,
also
it's
often think of them the same way that humans do to the other
yeah,
aliens.
yeah.
So like where it's just like this alien has seen battle before or whatever, but like it was just weird because like it made it seem like the mystery was it was Kirkath and that the Paramount mover was the one in danger, where it was the
Kirkath was
opposite.
definitely. I was feeling the thing of like Kirkath feels like a red herring, like
Yeah.
something where they're trying to kind of lead you on to the idea of like this is going to be the traitor. Um, and then yeah, it's definitely it hits a point where it's like we're on red herring number 3 or 4.
Well, and not even that. It's just like this. Your baiting of the red herring has gone so long that it's just like,
Yes.
unless this is the whole book, right? Like Clue, great example of doing a whole movie surrounding red herrings.
Mm-hmm.
But that is a story centered around that aspect. This book hasn't been that. So now that we're just questioning this red herring, it's just like, now I'm confused. I'm like, as a reader, I'm not questioning who's who because like, oh, the mystery is so enticing. I'm questioning who's who because I'm like, I'm fucking lost.
Yeah.
Because everything
yeah, I
else
get
is
you.
moving so fast, right? Because that's when the pacing in the book like picks up to this weird extent that it hasn't been at yet. So that's where it's just like, what are we doing? So I was confused and like I wasn't sure who was who. So I never felt like Kirkath's character was like one that I was like, oh no, she died. I was like, so okay, so the ethereal that seemingly was harboring this kind of extremist anti-human sentiment. So while technically still on the right side, was still kind of fucking with shit, is dead. Oh no?
Yeah.
Like I'm just like she didn't seem like she was very good for the Tau anyway, because we've already it's pretty much established at this point that creating any type of unrest or distrust in the humans is a problem when trying to take their worlds. Because kind of denotes to us, they don't want to be the Imperium of Man.
No.
Let's talk about let's talk about the best character. Let's talk about
Is it time? Is it
Mr.
time for us
Ghodh
to-
himself.
Have we been waiting for Ghodh enough?
Yes.
See what I did there?
Yes.
Hell yeah. Dude, the Kroot. So we talked about the Kroot when you were giving me the Tau lore. We brought up the Kroot, and I thought they were really cool. And I think it was, admittedly, I think a lot of it was kind of surface level of just like their design is cool. Their fighting tactics are really cool and interesting. This book is pushing the Kroot for SummerSlam so hard. It is such a
Bring
like,
back the Kroot combo box.
literary experience. Enough for me to be like, all right, I need more Kroot. Let's give them their own book instead of them having to share the story. Yeah, shout out to Ghodh. They are great.
Yeah, well, and there were so many interesting parts. Like, I mean, first of all, how they like first show up, where it's just like they just seem like these like they just seem like these spooky creatures in the trees, and then they're like, oh shit, it's the Kroot.
Right.
And Kay's kind of like unsure how to deal with him. But what's
Kay
so
doesn't have a ton
interesting
of
is they like,
experience with them, no.
yeah, but like what's so interesting is the Kroot start talking, and they're kind of talking in Kroot, and then he's just kind of like, oh right, they're the Tau don't do that.
Hang on, let me switch
Tau
over to this other
Kroots
language for
talk
them.
Tau now. Yeah, like it was so interesting. Like that part was really cool because it's just like essentially like, look, one way or the other, they have had to adapt themselves. Unfortunately, probably through eating various Tau, but at some point in the past.
The whole
but they
eating and
have,
like absorbing the characteristics of that
yeah, it's,
I learned after this. I did some like digging further. I can't remember if we talked
yeah.
about this in your lore information, but like the whole aspect about like the Kroot and the orc relationship that's going on, where like the older generations of Kroot were like changed as a result of eating orcs.
No, yeah. So that was new. This was the thing I noted about. I was like, that some apparently the ancient Kroot knew of the quirks. Like the Kroot have been around apparently for a fucking long time. Like this is millions of years.
Yeah.
Cause like the Quarks were really only around in that war in heaven. Cause like once the Eldar kind of took control of the Quarks, you know, they devolved. So like knowing a Quark at their prime means millions of years
Yeah.
have passed.
Have to be extremely old to know of that. Yeah.
So like that's so fascinating. Like there needs to be more information on that. That's crazy.
Mm-hmm. That's what I'm saying. We gotta let's get a Kroot specific narrative.
Yeah, because I mean, here's the thing,
Let's
right?
get
Like when they're talking to
yeah.
each other, you don't have to write it all broken English like you kind of did when you're writing a Kroot trying to talk Tau, right? Because this was because like when we do have Kroot's perspective, they use complete sentences, and he talks in essentially complete sentences to himself because he's speaking his own language, right? He doesn't have to think about, oh, what's this word? You know, he doesn't have to do that thing, right? That often second, like second language speech, speakers have to do. They're not like me speaking Polish where I essentially speak like a toddler. They don't have to do that in your native tongue. So yeah, we need something. I need more Ghodh, which at least based on how the book ended, we very well may get more Ghodh. In Elemental Council 2, it feels like we were really set up for it. Like at the end of the book.
Yeah.
Really had that like Avengers like after credits scene. So
Yuri
feel
is
to
revealed after everything goes down. Yuri is revealed like, actually I am super alive after all. I was only mostly dead. And then sorry, I keep saying Yuri. It's me. Yuri has them because there's that whole other plot with like where the assassin posing as Yuri orders like the bombing run on the planet that's gonna like kill a ton of people, including Tau. And
it's gonna leave the base open, all that stuff.
Yuri has to like order that be withdrawn before it happens. And yeah, the end of the book itself is a little more open-ended about like he's alive, but as far as what's going to happen next, they're not quite so sure.
Yeah, it just kind of ended with the like, we have a member of the Elemental Council still there. Let's get Ghodh. And then, you get to see Ghodh. And then, you get your
call the Ghodh phone or like light up the Ghodh signal.
Yeah, right. But yeah, so like at least there is at least the chance of more Ghodh. And I think the good reviews for this book will at least potentially give us that. But I just want to lightly touch on, I guess, Artimax a little bit more as a villain.
I
gave a lot of my opinions, but yeah,
I've said like 10 words about him. I would love to talk more about Artimax myself. What my thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, how did you feel about him? Because I kind of gave a lot of mine.
I think Artimax rips. That's the PG version I'm saying of that. Artimax I think he is extremely successful in what he is supposed to do, if that makes sense. He is a singular sergeant of the Raptors. He seemingly exists to remind the reader of how scary a single competent space marine can be.
Yes.
He is very much the Darth Vader of this story, in that like he shows up and like entire squadrons are like, oh God, what do we do? We don't stand a chance against this guy. He is cunning, he is ruthless, he is methodical in his efforts, bloodthirsty. He makes for a great villain. I definitely understand if somebody reads this who is like experienced with 40K and is like, oh my God, enough with the Space Marine stuff already. Like, get this guy out of here. But I do think he is a great, compelling villain. It is interesting how so much of this book is obviously being told from the Tau perspective. And the way that the author writes this, you would think that the Tau, you would think that there is like this interesting like fetishization of their understanding of the Space Marines. Because the way they talk about this guy constantly, it is like he is the apex human.
Yeah.
And they're just constantly describing like how ruthless and powerful and incredible he is, and his brain is so big and he's so good at his muscles. Like he got all A's in muscle school, and you know, he's the bestest of all. Like it gets into like a Gary Stu thing of like,
yeah,
there's so many times where another character, like an ancillary character, is telling you, the reader, how big and strong and cool he is. And I'm like, would they think that? Is that really the takeaway they're going to have, and not just like, man, fuck this guy? Like, is that not really
right? Yeah. I agree.
How that would go. Yeah.
No, I 100% agree. And I mean, like, I feel like, you know, the whole thing to me with Artemax himself is just how like, you know, it's kind of like, it's actually, I do like what you brought up with like the, you know, it gives the reader kind of this like impactful like reminder about like how scary a single, because what it reminds me of is like the Rogue One scene with, like you mentioned,
that's why I bring
Vader,
up Darth Vader.
You
Yeah,
know?
totally.
Yeah, because like you know, the prequels made us feel like, oh, those dang Sith always manipulating, you know, and it's like, you know, it's like, sure, they you know, they killed Qui-Gon, but like, you know, the Jedi are always are taking them out, you know. And then like the Clone Wars, you know, gives the Asajj Ventress, which is scary, but not necessarily like, but like you never feel like you're kind of in these scenarios where you're like, oh well, they're still gonna lose, blah 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 blah, you know. Like there's these various points of like Star Wars things and video games and all that where I think it was very easy to feel kind of immune to the Sith as a threat. So like they're like, so clearly like the director of Rogue One was like, nah, I need to remind people why to the average person Darth Vader is a fucking nightmare. And so here's this horror scene.
We, the audience, are so familiar with him to the point that he is defanged a bit. But for the person living in that world, there are so many people in the galaxy who don't even know who that is. They literally don't know who this guy is. For him to show up like a phantom in the darkness, and then he comes out and he is doing stuff with the Force. He is throwing dudes up into the ceiling and slashing them with the lightsaber. Like, your brain can't comprehend it when you're within that universe, because you could very well be somebody who's like, I don't know what the Force is.
Exactly.
And for us, the reader, we're so inundated with it. We understand so much about it already. And I think with the Space Marines, it's a similar thing. There is so much we know about the Space Marines. We're so familiar with them and all the chapters and all the prime marks. We know what they can do. I appreciate the author making this really solid attempt to reintroduce the threat of a Space Marine and why they are so feared across the galaxy.
Yeah, because I mean, like, basically it took a ghost keel to show up to like deal with him.
Yeah.
Like the only, and granted, when he surrendered, he basically fake surrendered because he was planning this whole thing with the assassin and all that. But like, that was the big thing, is that it's just like, they like, if he was the realistically, like the thing that would stop him, and partly the thing that did, was like the battle suits are the only thing that they could use to just deal with the Space Marines. And that's why like his chapter was wiped out, but that wasn't because, a 1v1 with some random fire warrior happened. It's because they used battle suits. It's because, Noble Dawn and, what was her bonded pair name?
Oh, dang it.
Less Noble Dawn.
I wrote this down.
I forgot his name, but like, it's because like they went out there and kicked ass, and it's because, the Space Marine, either, vehicles or just themselves were obliterated by barracudas and other tanks, like there is just so much. There are so many things that can defeat a Space Marine, but now we are looking at one Space Marine who is utilizing the fact that he is alone, and like he has to 1v5, essentially just like 5 schmucks, and not even 5 because Say is always in the ship, and only one of them can fight, right? So like, this guy is looking at a 1v1 where the one just has a little bit of like, essentially has a healer behind them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's it. But other than that, like, it's a 1v1, and that lone soldier is not winning a 1v1.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
And so I agree. What I just didn't like was kind of like, I kind of like, didn't like how he kind of devolves, right? Like, he went from being this like almost like just kind of like spooky phantom to being like Michael Myers, where it's you don't see him and then all of a sudden he's there and you can do nothing and he kills you, to being kind of villain of the week, I'll destroy this base and everyone in it. Like
he sort of reverts back into more of the mindset you expect from a Space Marine. He becomes a bit more two-dimensional in that regard.
Yeah, and like the way he's like playing the mind games with them at that point, it's just like, bro, stop playing with your food. It's like, this isn't, and it's like, why the reason it sucks is because it's like, this isn't what I expect a Space Marine, especially a Raptor, to. This is what I expect from a Chaos Space Marine,
Sure.
And I wonder if some of this stems from the fact that like, maybe a lot of authors aren't used to making a normal Space Marine a villain, but it's
putting
like,
them in that position. Like, yeah, definitely.
But like, you don't need to like revert them to the cartoon, because I like when a Chaos Space Marine's kind of like villain of the week, a little bit cartoony, because it's funny and it's just like it's how they are. They're just mad. They are super villains. Like, they're just comic super villaons.
Oh yeah, they're super
Raptor,
Sentai villains. Yeah, in a big rubber suit.
But a super, sorry, a Raptor's Space Marine isn't that ever. They're like, yes, he will be manipulative at the right time. That isn't the time. Like playing around with this random like Tau that you know is completely unarmed, you've seen multiple times, has never fired a weapon at you, isn't good at, like, every other Space Marine would just have like just stepped on her, like, because he's like, I don't want to expend my ammo. Well, a normal Space Marine would just step on them. I mean, hell, in Space Marine 3, when you see a normal person, like the trader guardsman, you literally can run in through them. And that's like accurate. So it's like, they would just do that. They wouldn't sit there and like play with their food. Like it just is weird to me. Like that's a Chaos Space Marine thing. And that's the only reason I started to feel more annoyed with Artimax. I was just like, all right, bro, get fucking on with it.
It's again, it's getting back into what I feel like is kind of the weakness of the book, is that there is a point in that story where you're, instead of being like super engaged with the espionage and the intrigue of it, you're kind of like checking your watch, like, okay, can we get to sort of the meat of things here, where it feels like all the characters involved are like really slowing down in what they're supposed to be doing, and kind of, not moving as I don't know how to describe it, but it's just like everything slows down to a crawl, including the characters themselves in how they process things and how they react and the actions they take. And it's just like,
Mm-hmm.
it takes what is like up to that point a very fast-paced, frenetic story with a lot of interweaving elements that you got to keep track of, and then suddenly it slows way down. But it's like, it's not at a point in the story that feels like, okay, this is great because it gives me an opportunity to kind of catch up as the reader and reaffirm what I know and what I understand. It's like, no, at this point you should be rushing towards the conclusion. And instead it seems like everybody's really kind of taking their time with everything, and it's just like, blah.
Yeah, exactly. It's just funny because most of the time you're like, I feel like the ending came too fast. This time it's like,
totally
speed it up a little. Like this time you're like, speed it up. Let's get into what I was thinking, maybe be relatively kind of last topic ish, but I think could be interesting, because it could we could get pretty expansive with this, which is the kind of the things about Tau culture that this book kind of explained that we didn't really get to see much of previously.
Mm-hmm.
One small thing. Oh, I forgot to make this note earlier when we were going over some of the general thoughts. I fucking find it hilarious. How I wrote a note in here. I was like, how the hell is chapter 16 can end with, you wouldn't believe what happened next?
That's a bold move. It's a bold move on their
literally
part.
Ends with the like, and what happened next was so shocking. I read that. I was like, bro, what the fuck do you mean?
Yeah.
But yes, so we talked a lot about like the inner cast kind of commingling, but one thing that I found actually very interesting with the ethereals is because we haven't had a lot of discussion about how do the Tyranids and Gene Stealer cults affect Tau worlds.
Yeah, that gets brought up a little bit, some of the Gene Stealer stuff.
Yeah, and so like I guess apparently we do now know that like the ethereals are not immune to the Gene Stealer kiss, I guess. That they could, and that I guess in a way they and other Tau will have some capacity to fall to Gene Stealer cults.
I can't remember if it was in the book itself or it was in like the other reading that I was doing afterwards of them like having a protocol to address like an ethereal having been taken over by the Gene Stealers.
No, that was in the book. Because
so
that was how that was the card they played to figure out that Yori, the fake Yori, was an assassin, right?
Yeah.
Because they were like, hey, if somebody says an ethereal, if somebody tells a commander this ethereal might be like literally, especially like anybody of any form of authority, even as small as the members of this elemental council, where they're like ranked like 2/3, like they essentially get to be like, hey, I think they might have gene stealer corruption. The ethereal just has to, like, to their culture and to their bylaws, that ethereal just has to be like, all right, take me in. And if they don't, then that is a sign that that corruption has gone through. Like something's wrong. Because if they're of right mind, essentially, it's that. I mean, this is a bit of a bad. This is not necessarily a catch-all mentality, but it's the idea of the if you have nothing to hide, then you have nothing to worry about thing.
Yeah.
But like, this is the sense of like, for the greater good, I must take a health exam. And I mean, that's all we know about it is that it's a health exam. We like don't know if it like
We don't know
does
the
anything to
specifics,
the ethereal. Yeah, like we don't know if it like fucks with their mind or if they like perceive things or if their bodies are tampered with. We have no idea. But what we can ostensibly assume from it is that they can survive this check. So at least from that aspect, they are supposed to be willing to do it because they're like, okay, I'll just get checked. If I'm good, then we're fine. So that's the whole thing is that then when they, when like, like that Yori is like, no, I'm not doing that. They're like, that's not right. That's not the right answer. So I thought that was cool. I kind of like that's that learning that like, hey, the Tau are in fact susceptible to gene stealer cults, and which hey, you're a Kit Bash fan out there, new idea for your gene stealer cult army. Just saying. But I wonder what it makes me think more about like what are other things that would happen if gene stealer cults affected a Tau world more, right? Like would because of like the way that the neural receptors work to the DNA of their pilots, I wonder like if they wouldn't be able to pilot their battle suits anymore, and they would just like kill the user because like their DNA is shifted.
Oh, yeah.
Their DNA isn't the same anymore. And that's how those work. They work based on having a complete DNA match. And if you attempt, as I told you, and we talked about it in the battle suit episode, if you don't have that match, the suit literally will fry you.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I wonder if I imagine that has to have happened. But otherwise, I mean, like we kind of mentioned, like there was a lot of interesting, like the re-education process, the whole, like essentially the fate that like, because we got to see two things, the fate that Kay was supposedly going to face, right? Where it was like, hey, yeah, we're going to be sent to, we're effectively going to be paraded at a shame march and then sent to this. And it's because I guess apparently the Earthcast leader was frozen. He was put into stasis. And so he had old laws in his head. He's like a doctor that has been in it too long and is like, yeah, I'm going to do this like hyper risky version of the practice because it's what I'm used to doing. Despite that, now medical code says there's a way better method to do it. There's a Scrubs episode about this, actually. Shout out to Scrubs. But like, yeah, like it's kind of felt like that, where it was like, okay, so this kind of old head is grumpy that the mission failed, despite that it was truly of no fault to Kay at all. In fact, she actually made it less of a loss than it even was. But, fuck that, I guess. This old hack's pride has been hurt, so someone else must pay. Which then was my favorite part when Yori comes into that whole thing and he's kind of like, it seems like it was more like your fault, bitch.
Actually, according to my records, You burnt. You did that.
Yeah, the leader is responsible for his underlings, not the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
I like that. That was fun. But it does, what that makes me think of is, it's like, because the whole thing that I think comes with this book, right, is it's the sign. It's what everybody who is a Tao hater wanted, really, right? Which is it is the sign that no, not everything in the Tao Empire is perfect.
They are not flawless, untouchable beings,
correct.
incapable of having issues. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like they talk about it a lot, that there is a rot, there is a sickness in the Tao Empire. The humans try to treat this as there are traitors, where realistically what it is that Yori kind of truly tries to bring it more is that there is like just like large amounts of like pride, and like I said, realistically it's really just like pride, whether that be self pride or like a racial pride, is beginning to tear away at some of the foundations of the Tao Va, the greater good. And it kind of is clear from the jump with this Earth cast, leader that is like, nah, I'm going to send them to the mines. They're going to the fish fields because, like screw what protocol says. I'm embarrassed. So I need someone else to fall on the sword for me, right? Which is like what the Imperium does, like, which is why, like, I think a lot of ethereals look at that as like a rot, right? Because they're like, no, we don't want to fall into that. We see what they do.
Yeah, totally.
So I wonder like how many ethereals are kind of in, the Yori kind of mindset versus how many ethereals are maybe in the other side, right? Where they're maybe a little bit more like, I don't know, we should maybe, get rid of all these extra unnecessary, affiliates.
What was altogether, like, now having read this book, going forward, are there any big questions you still have about the Tao specifically that are like that weren't answered or weren't really addressed in this, that are you still would want to have like an additional codex or something be written to fully address?
Honestly, what I kind of want is, I kind of want, maybe in the vein that some of the detective books are written, I just want to see someone like Orr in a book.
Sure.
I want to watch them go from getting onto this planet to starting a rebellion, like planting all these seeds, working with these people, essentially like trying to push these revolutions. I would love to see that, because that interested me so much. And like how, because like that's just not something with the Tao that we really are like really I knew about or I thought of. Like I just always thought like, all right, if the normal diplomacy doesn't work, then they send in the fire squads,
We're so used
I never
to
thought, yeah.
Yeah, the traditional appearance of like the water cast and the fire cast of like, this is what they do, this is what they do. And yeah, a lot of the groundwork, a lot of the dirty work not really being represented previously. And yeah, we're definitely getting a better sense of it with this book.
Yeah, otherwise it's going to sound stupid, but it's my curiosity. I'm inherently curious about how does Tao romance kind of work. The reason I think about that is because we're sitting in these two examples of like, now it with Jules, it was kind of clear that like, obviously no matter what, this man was never going to be allowed to openly profess his love to an ethereal. Like,
Oh
it
yeah,
just wasn't
no.
happening. But it made me think about, like, I wonder what happens when, if if a Guevesa or a Guela, that how, if there's any type of thing with that somewhere else, maybe where the culture is more intermingled or something like that, or does the Talva just totally prevent that shit? Like,
The
that's what I
Tau
don't know.
clearly don't have they don't value the biological aspects of each other the way that humans do. They don't
Right.
share a lot of the same like culture and ideas about relationships that we have. They have this concept of like the bond brothers, the bond sisters, but it would be very interesting to get a better understanding of like how the Tau develop partnerships, like naturally develop partnerships and connections with each other, even if it is in a way that like frankly is very alien to us and maybe requires like a lot of work to kind of understand. I still think it'd be really interesting to kind of approach that topic and that subject.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing to me about that was when we got into Say's introduction, and his I forgot her name, but the pilot that you know he loved her. I mean, he admitted that in the book, like, to the reader, like that, like like he truly loved her. And I kind of wonder, like, would this, like, like, because, like, we don't really know much about, like, how their procreation works as a species, right? Like, because, like, most other species, like the Aldar, we know it's pretty much the same.
Mm-hmm.
It's just other aspects of it are different. But with, like, the Tau, because, like, we were kind of informed through this, like, background piece that, like, they don't have somewhat similar organs and, like, materials to, like, they're not mammalian, for example, right? Where, like, clearly the
again,
Eldar and
very much a
humans
biological divide in
Yeah.
how they function versus how we as humans sort of expect ourselves to function.
Yeah, so I kind of wonder, like, how does family work? Do you just kind of, do they generally at this point just kind of do test tube babies? Do you and do, like, when, is there any form of familial culture? That's the stuff I want to know. Like, I want to know, how does the family culture work? Is there, especially in, like, is there in certain houses or castes or whatever, is there motive to follow in a similar way? Is there motive to, because, like, none of them talk about their parents, and if anybody was going to do that, it would have been Kay, because she was the youngest. But her, the only, like, figure we had in that aspect was her mentor, and so, but, like, we don't, as far as we know, that isn't like that isn't a father. That's just, if anything, like a fatherly figure, but only from a mentor aspect.
When
So I'm inherently curious how that works with the Tau.
After I finished,
made me think more of it.
Yeah, definitely. After I finished reading this book, another thing I kind of looked into, and at this point, I think I was like, I'm not going to read too much into this on the off chance that it is something that's being saved for like a future episode. But I was really interested in this idea of, there was a character named Commander Puretide, like a Tau commander. And there's this thing that gets talked about where Puretide was like hugely influential to future Firecast commanders. And when they died, their consciousness, like their memories, were extracted in such a way that it could then be put onto like a chip, like a brain chip, and then Tau commanders could like use the brain chip to like draw upon those memories. And it opens up a whole can of worms about like, because I'm thinking about, I'm thinking about Swordlight, who is like a clone of a clone of a clone of a clone, and is meant to represent like this original Swordlight. And it really had me knocking about on the idea of like, what do generations mean to the Tau, and how
Mm-hmm.
different it must be from us? Because for us, like, generations are important in the passing down of culture and information. And it's clear that like they have built up these technologies and these ideas of being able to just like take ideas and memories from these previous generations and supplant them into the new generation without them having to be present themselves or be alive to actually ensure that that information gets passed on.
Mm-hmm.
And it definitely throws into the mix this whole idea of like, what is the purpose of a family? What is the purpose of having children and having grandchildren in a society like this, where they seemingly are able to take what's there, slam it onto a neurochip, and then like pass it on that way, as opposed to just doing it like through word of mouth or through direct like familial lineage. And then I was like, I'm gonna stop.
Sure. But I think it's
I
a,
was
I
like,
mean,
that's
that's a
enough
great
thinking.
thought. But it's a great thought. And I mean, really, at this point, like, no. I mean, realistically, I would have said, like, no, it's probably not something that maybe I would have thought to go into an episode on, because I don't know of anything that
Yeah,
discusses that,
yeah.
It's like, that's what throws me off. So I'm so
This
like,
here's
maybe
what
we
we
would
should do.
one day, but
I should take a moment and I should genuinely say about this book as we're closing up here, that it should be praised, because the best books that are about like the lore or like expanding the lore or telling stories within a universe, the best books are the ones that you read them and then you come away from them so curious, with questions, excited, passionate, that you then are compelled to go out on your own and continue looking things up and finding more information. Because after reading the last two books we did, which were great and I enjoyed them, but I wasn't doing like wiki deep dives after the fact. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And clearly with this one, like there was like multiple things on this that I was like, let me jump over to like the 40K wiki and see, if there's more about this. Let me hop over to the like it it ignited my curiosity. It made me think more about how these things worked within the 40K universe. So hats off to the author for that, because yeah, the book is, there's already a lot happening in the book itself, and it's trying to do a lot of things at once. It gets a little clunky at times, but it's telling this really deep narrative with a lot of characters and a lot of relationships. And then I still came away from it being like, I kind of want more, like of these specific
Mhm.
aspects. So, hats off to it for that.
No, absolutely. And I mean, first, I definitely need to denote the fact that, you you never need to feel like you can't do your own research
Yeah,
on
you've
the
never
show,
given me like a
because,
hard lock.
um,
You've never been like,
yeah,
don't
because
look up things on your
I,
own, for sure.
because you doing that, you finding stuff, because this is what these books are supposed to do. A lot of people conflate that the books are here to sell models, and they are, but in a more indirect sense. What they're meant to do is, the books are meant to sit here and make you wonder, what the hell is this? Look more into that stuff. You
Mm-hmm.
find out that there is stuff in these codexes, and you learn more about that. And then as you learn more about that, you see more stuff with the game and the models and everything else, that you're finally like, I I want to I want to get all in on this group, and you're like, hell yeah. I mean, shit, like that's how, like, that's how I end up with these, like, oh, I want I got a bunch of these models to, this time, or I'm building this army, or I'm building that army. It's like, I got super into their lore. I went on huge dives. I figured so much shit out, and I was like, that's really cool. I want to play them because I want to essentially enact this through the game. And that's how it's supposed to work. So like, that's what I like to see in these books is someone like you, especially to, and even myself to, but anybody who's especially newer to hear about this stuff, which is why like our episodes are so like, it's so titular to how our episodes are supposed to operate, where it's like, I am serving, with these episodes, serving a baseline. Like I am serving a little appetizer for you to learn about all this random stuff. And here's a bunch of things from over the many years, right? So that you don't have to dive into such and such books. But then what you can do is you can go and be like, what the hell did that mean? Go look that up. And then that's when you deep dive, but you do that on your own. That's what I like to see. That's what this show is meant to be for. And that's what these books are meant to do. And I'm glad that this book does that.
Yeah.
Because, bolter porn books are fun sometimes, right? Like going to an action movie, right? Watching Fast and Furious is just fun. But you're not leaving with questions the same way. Most of your questions, if anything, are like, why the fuck did that happen?
Mm-hmm.
But it's not, I want to know more. It's just like, that was weird anyway. So, that's kind of my big thing. And where it's like, I'm glad this book does that, and it makes you think and want to learn.
Yeah, absolutely does.
All right. Well, I think we've gone long enough for this lovely book discussion.
Yeah.
This is a great book. It's a solid 8 out of 10 doubloons.
Doubloons?
And I don't know. I almost said Smeggledorfs.
That's
I
not
don't even know what that means, and I agree with you. What'd you say?
Literally what you said. We both quoted the same SpongeBob line.
Oh.
We're in sync.
And
also it's like...
But yeah, so no, it was a great book. I really hope Noah Van Guyen, however you say his last name, I'm sorry.
Should be Newen.
Okay. Noah Van Guyen, I hope he gets more books.
Agreed.
About the Tau. I hope he gets more books in general because he's like Mike Books. He makes great books.
Please write a Kroot book. Please and thank you.
Yeah. Other than that though,
hey,
there is plenty to get to in the future.
Hey.
More book clubs to come.
Can I make a bold statement?
Yeah.
I'm gonna pick the next book.
Ooh, okay.
Because I have 3 books that I'm planning to read within the next couple months here. And I'm gonna pick one of them to be the one that we do next. That's the stage we're at. We're at the point now where I feel confident enough to be like, I'm gonna pick the book.
Okay. There's definitely going to be there's some point I'm debating. It depends on how some stuff happens when 11th comes out, right?
Sure.
But there's a series that I'm debating having us start and go through. It's a trilogy that hasn't had its 3rd book yet, which it's a whole thing when there's a trilogy but like ahead of time, right, to another book coming out. But we know that there's another book coming out, which is why at least we know it's a trilogy. It could be a 4-book series and we don't even know it, but until then. But the thing about it is that I was reading an article today that really got me thinking, and it might actually end up being kind of important if some of those theories, which I have heard similar things to, come about. And that might happen within 11th edition. It may not. So we'll see. But it would be realistically the way we would know that is the third book will come out. I will find out essentially if some aspects to that are true, and then I'd be like, we need to read this trilogy.
Gotcha. Okay.
Until then, though, because we have no idea when that book will come out. So until then, take your picks. All right. Until then, we will see you guys next week for an episode.
We'll figure it out.
All right.
Goodbye.